It feels like the temperature is really rising lately, especially if you look at the federal government versus some states and local authorities on immigration.
Yeah, it seems like more than just friction, doesn't it? It's becoming a real point of conflict.
Definitely. It feels like they're just not seeing eye to eye at all on enforcement.
Well, it's more than disagreement, I think. What's really striking is this direct collision course.
Collision course.
Yeah, in how laws are being read, how they're being enforced, right there on the ground. It shines a light on this fundamental tension, in the whole system.
That's a good way to put it. And that's exactly what we're diving into today.
Right.
We're focusing on the incoming Trump administration's plans for immigration. They seem pretty clear.
Especially with Tom Homan appointed as the border czar.
Exactly, him.
Yeah.
And how those plans are just smashing right into resistance from these sanctuary jurisdictions.
Like Illinois?
Like Illinois, yeah.
Yeah.
We're really going to unpack Governor JB Pritzker's stance specifically. He's been very vocal.
Very. And we've looked at quite a few sources for this news reports, opinion pieces, even a briefing document. They all kind of paint this picture of, an escalating showdown.
A showdown. Sounds about right. So our goal today is to get past the sound bites.
Yeah, understand the real core of it.
Who are the main players? What's driving them? What are these deeper tensions really about?
Okay, so where do we start? Pritzker's challenge.
Let's start there. That seems to be the spark, right? Pritzker's very public declaration.
It really stands out, doesn't it? That quote, "You come for my people, you come through me."
Wow.
I mean, that's not subtle. That's not hinting at resistance.
Yeah.
It's a direct, unambiguous line in the sand, a confrontation.
And the timing is key, too. This was right after President-elect Trump said he'd start deporting undocumented immigrants who came in under the last administration.
Right. That's the context. We even saw an open letter to JB Pritzker in the sources.
Oh, yeah. What did that say?
It really framed that quote as him throwing down the gauntlet, basically saying, okay, let's do this.
So setting the stage for a fight.
Pretty much. An intense one, it looks like.
Okay, so gauntlet thrown. How did the federal side respond? Predictably.
Well, yeah, you could say that. Equally direct, maybe. Enter Tom Homan.
The new border czar.
Right. And his background, former acting IC director, that sends a pretty clear signal itself.
Signal about what? Like seriousness.
Seriousness, a firm approach, assertive enforcement. That seems to be the message.
Got it. And his actual words in response to Pritzker.
About as blunt as you can get. No problem. Game on.
Game on, okay.
Yeah. It's stark, almost confrontational, like you said. It really underlines the administration's determination.
They're not backing down.
Doesn't seem like it. And it's not just Homan's words either.
Right. You mentioned Attorney General Pam Bondi.
Exactly. Her support for possibly seeping criminal prosecution against sanctuary cities.
Criminal prosecution. For what exactly?
For impeding ICE operations, essentially. That adds a whole other layer, a legal weight to it all.
So it's definitely moving beyond just a war of words.
Seems that way. And there's a concrete example of this already happening in Chicago.
Ah, okay. Homan mentioned specific ICE operations there.
He did. He detailed some recent arrests, and the specifics are, they're quite pointed.
How so?
Well, look at how he framed them. He listed 9 Tren de Aragua members.
Okay, the gang.
Yeah. Then 2 illegal aliens convicted of murder that his state prison released, and 7 or 8 child sex predators.
So focusing heavily on serious criminal accusations.
Exactly. He's not just talking about general immigration sweeps. He's presenting these as removing major public safety threats.
Making the streets safer.
That's his explicit claim, yeah. He said these ops made Chicago and Illinois safer, and then he added that ICE plans to return.
So linking enforcement directly to community safety, that's the federal justification.
That seems to be the core argument. Protecting communities from dangerous individuals, regardless of immigration status.
Which brings us right into the whole sanctuary city debate itself.
The heart of it, really. Because from the federal viewpoint, these places aren't just, passively not helping.
They see it as obstruction.
Right. As knowingly harboring, concealing illegal aliens, or actively impeding ICE. That's their framing.
And there's been talk of executive orders against these cities too, hasn't there?
It keeps coming up. And Homan's quote, "If they don't want to help us, then just get out of the way. We'll do it for you." That really shows their willingness to bypass local authorities if needed.
Which raises that big question about federal versus state power, right?
The classic federalism question. The federal government leans heavily on the idea of federal supremacy in immigration.
Meaning their laws override state laws.
Essentially, yes, based on the Constitution's supremacy clause. The argument is federal law trumps, pardon the term, state statutes here.
A direct challenge to the autonomy these sanctuary jurisdictions are trying to claim.
Exactly.
Okay, let's shift gears a bit to the language being used.
Yeah.
Because it's not exactly diplomatic.
No, not at all. The rhetoric is highly charged on both sides.
Pritzker's side first. What stood out?
Well, saying Republicans cannot know a moment of peace and calling for mass protests, mobilization, disruption. That's strong stuff.
It definitely sounds like calling people to action, significant action.
And then the comparisons he used, referring to Republicans as quislings and cowards, and then even escalating to tyrants and traitors.
Wow. That's incredibly strong language in politics.
It is. And our sources actually draw parallels, to similar things said by other Democrats before Maxine Waters, Hillary Clinton, Eric Holder.
Cory Booker, too, I said.
Yeah, him too. Suggesting this kind of confrontational style isn't entirely new.
Okay, so how does the federal side respond to that kind of rhetoric?
They tend to dismiss it, frame it as political theater.
Just for show?
That's the implication. And they argue his focus is wrong, that he's failing to prioritize community safety. It's a total disconnect in how they see each other's motives.
Complete disconnect. Okay, so stepping back, looking at this whole picture, what are the fundamental tensions here? What's really driving this conflict?
Well, at its core, it's that inherent tension in federalism, isn't it?
The division of power.
Right. Federal versus state and local, specifically on immigration enforcement. You've got the federal government saying, this is our job constitutionally.
Well, some states and cities are saying
they're prioritizing protecting their immigrant populations, maybe integrating them. They often see the federal approach as too harsh or maybe harmful to, community trust.
It reminds you of other historical clashes, right?
Yeah.
States pushing back against federal mandates on different issues.
Definitely echoes of that. It really boils down to clashing priorities, too.
Federal focus on enforcement safety.
As they define it, yes. Versus the sanctuary jurisdictions focusing more on immigrant rights, inclusion within their communities.
And the potential fallout. What could happen next?
Well, you have to expect legal battles, right? The federal government trying to challenge sanctuary policies in court.
Makes sense.
And politically. This is likely just going to deepen the divides we already see. It could really fire up supporters on both sides.
Yeah, you can see that happening. And it's interesting how the main figures get portrayed.
Totally different narratives depending on who you ask.
Pritzker. Defender of his people against federal overreach.
Or Pritzker. Obstructionist, hindering lawful enforcement.
And Homan. Effective enforcer protecting the public.
Or Homan. Intimidating figure carrying out unjust policies. It really depends on your viewpoint.
And some sources mention this isn't the only criticism Pritzker faces in Illinois, right? It goes beyond just immigration.
Yeah, some brought up his handling of COVID, other state political divisions. It suggests this immigration fight is tangled up in a bigger, messier political context within Illinois itself.
Interesting. Okay, so as we wrap up this deep dive, what's the single most important thing for you, the listener, to take away?
I think the main point is, this is a serious, escalating conflict. Federal versus some states and cities on immigration enforcement.
Not just a minor disagreement.
No, it's fundamental. A clash of ideologies, legal views, ways of handling a really complex issue. And you see it in the strong words, the deeply held beliefs on both sides.
Which leaves us all with a pretty big question to chew on, doesn't it?
What's that?
Thinking about the real-world impact.
Yeah.
What are the consequences of this federal-state fight going to be for the actual people, the communities caught in the middle?
Yeah.
And how might this all shake out, in the courts and the political arena down the road?
It's definitely important to keep those different perspectives we talked about in mind, and maybe dig even deeper into just how complex immigration policy and federalism really are.
Absolutely. This is clearly a story that's still unfolding.
With big implications for the future.
For sure. Well, thanks for taking this deep dive with us.